It's 3 o'clock now. What time do we get started? Is it really 3 o'clock?
Little after 2. Ask Heather, she'll know. What time did we get started, Heather?
About 2.
Okay.
About 2?
I'm going to finish the atomists, and then I think I'm going to take a break for about 5, and we can start again. Is that all right?
Okay.
Okay, the atomists. We're at about 5th century BC. And here is where we start with their key development. Up till now, pretty much the progression of thought has been asymptomatic, asystematic, meaning there has been no systematic approach to the nature of things. They've kind of hunted and pecked around, they've had some ideas, they've tossed some ideas back and forth, but for the most part it's been this kind of the wild, wild west of ideas. With the atomists, this starts to change. They mark the beginning of when we start to say, hey, we now need to put this in some form of system. For the first time, thinkers tried to develop a whole approach to the primary philosophical questions: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and politics. I'll get to that later. The actual, when it actually does show up, we'll get to that later. And the next two groups, the atomists and the sophists, made an effort towards systemization. However, they did not succeed. It took until Plato to actually get there. I wanted to deal with the atomists. They had a significant impact on philosophy in general, and in science as a whole. But dealing with the scope of their thought, we'd be here for a long time. And it isn't really, that their whole scope of their thought doesn't really impact Christianity as a whole. But there is one concept that they introduced that absolutely has impacted Christianity, and I'm going to get to it in a minute. This concept, of course, is actually what impacted Augustine, and of course, Luther and Calvin, absolutely. So here's a very brief summary of atomist thought. Remember, the atomists, like everybody else, are trying to reconcile Heraclitus and Parmenides. The atomists were materialists. Materialism equals reality is matter in motion. Everything, including non-material or mental phenomena, is explained entirely in physical material terms. Now, materialism is not being a filthy capitalist pig. Their kind of materialism is what I just described. The atomists were pluralists. Instead of a universal, a one stuff, they said, how about if we have many, many, many stuffs? Each of these stuffs are unchangeable. And of course, the reason they arrived at this conclusion, they said, well, this will satisfy Parmenides' assertion that things are unchanging and indestructible. But the smallest unit of this universal stuff is the only thing that can move or change. And this, of course, satisfies Heraclitus. They've actually arrived at a very interesting solution to the problems posed as is. Okay, this has a serious flaw because, after all, we're looking for a one-world substance that integrates everything and explains change. The atomist explanation pretty much makes everything you see, taste, touch, smell, hear, that it would have to have its own unique stuff. The world would then collapse on itself for the sheer weight of things, and man would be lost in a total, utter, blindingly chaotic world. So they decided this new concept. All physical things have two parts: qualitative characteristics and quantitative characteristics. This evolution of thought gave them the ability to subdivide qualities, colors, smells, sounds, versus quantities, number, length, shape, motion. It's pretty ingenious. See what they've done? See how they've parsed it down, given themselves the ability to categorize some things and not others? By removing quantities from consideration, they were able to reduce the number of stuffs needed to explain the universal stuff. They still needed to reconcile their ideas to Parmenides. They had a solution to absolutes, but now they needed to figure out what to do with flux. The answer to this question: are qualities real? Their logic went like this. When a man smells, is he smelling something real, or is his nose playing tricks on him? The simple answer is no, because smell is a quality based on man's nose, And the easiest way to address qualities was to conclude that nothing was real. Qualities are merely the way stuff affects man. Once again, the conclusion is that it's man's faculties that are the problem. Make a note. So in other words, it's all subjective. But this conclusion begs this question. If there are no qualities, what determines how these qualities, these things, operate? Their answer, the atomist logic went like this. The motion seen is from the physical pressure, the impact of the universal stuff against other universal stuff. Of course, this mental model is what we came to understand as atoms today. But they were applying this to the realm of metaphysics. So they decided that everything you see in action is ultimately acting like the mechanistic approach that we apply in science today, but it's happening to everything. Now, can you guess what this means? If you have everything acting metaphysically, acting mechanically, what does that mean? Think for a minute. What do you have? An endless string of causation, right?
I'm going to say abstract laws which govern the real. Right?
They govern the real, but it is determined. It is mechanical.
Right, determined.
This is the important
Laws
point.
which determine?
Cause and effect.
But they have causal relationship, but ultimately every atom that bumps against the next atom constantly produces this chain reaction,
Right, right.
but it's all determined. And this is what they introduced into Western thought, the concept of determinism. When you hear John Calvin talking about predestination is a form of determinism, this is atomistic thought. This is where this comes from.
And is a former low voltage certified electrician. Okay, so the theory of electricity comes from this as well.
Yes, here's the thing, and you see this a lot with ancient thought. They had some, actually, this explanation of the physical world is evolutionary.
Right.
It's the way we actually conceptualize our world, it's because it's the way it works. Now I'm making an important distinction. Mechanistically, their concept was fabulous, and it was essential to evolution in science. They were applying it to metaphysics. Do you see the distinction I'm making? So the atomists, the reason we decided to call them atoms, because atomist I think in Greek means indivisible.
Right, can't be cut.
Can't be cut, right. So you have a great physical representation in atoms, they can't be cut. But in the metaphysical world, if you can't cut the metaphysical world, you have a determinist world, which is exactly the conclusion they arrived at. And my point in this instance is to show that this is where determinism actually enters the picture. And this is what absolutely affects Christianity and the evolution of Christianity from here on out. And so in summary, since everything is materialistically caused, everything is acting in accord with a materialistic nature. So as the universal stuff interacts with other universal stuff, the smallest parts of the largest entities, all outcomes are determined. Their logic continued. Since man is made up of the same universal stuff, man is then without independent will. Man's life is equally determined. And now you can understand why the atomists are important in our unfolding discussion. They were the first people to offer a systemic argument for determinism. And of course, determinism is also known as predestination, and is central to Platonist Augustinian thought. With that, I'm going to take a break because I need to hit the little.
Okay, and for the technical of Philly, hold off and let me say a few words and we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay, I know this is taxing on the brain, all right? But the reason this is so very important is to understand, leading up to John's conclusion, is one of the absolute most popular Christian ministries there is right now. Huge. All right. Here is the sub-theme of their ministry. This is considered a for lack of a better term, Orthodox, evangelical, down the line, Christian ministry. One of the most popular that there is on the face of the earth right now. Here's the sub-theme of their ministry. Between two worlds. Okay? An elder that is an elder on a board of one of the biggest night counseling centers in the country has a blog, and the sub-theme of his blog is Between Two Spheres, Gazing at Our Heavenly Destiny. Okay? In theology, there's huge debates all the time, especially surrounding Reformed debate on as far as dispensationalist in the Bible or not dispensationalist. And you say, how could you not be a dispensationalist, at least Old Testament versus New Testament? But the argument is called continuity versus discontinuity. Okay? This all comes, what affects us in such a big way today, it comes from this.
Yes, it does.
And it lands right where we are today and affects how we do church and how we think and how Christians conduct their lives. So hang in there. You're not going to come away with every nuance and element, but you're going to come away with some very important elements.
Cool.
Okay, and we will take a 5-minute break, Philip.